quorum call, please?
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, here shortly I will ask unanimous consent to vote on the nominations of Jess Kramer to be the Assistant Administrator of the Office of Water and at the Environmental and Protection Agency, and Mr. Shawn McMaster to be the Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration. But first, I must speak on the historic delay and obstruction that my Democrat colleagues have put towards President Trump's nominees. So far this Congress, Democrats have not let one single civilian nominee pass by unanimous consent or by voice vote. By this point in the Biden presidency, 76 civilian nominees had been confirmed by voice vote or unanimous consent. This is truly an unprecedented moment in this chamber's history. For years, we have operated under courtesy and precedent to move swiftly to a portion of the president's nominees who have bipartisan support. For example, 90% of President Obama and President George W. Bush's civilian nominees were passed by voice vote or unanimous consent. And even in President Trump's first administration and the Biden administration, more than half of their civilian nominees were confirmed by voice vote or unanimous consent. Now, though, we have blanket obstruction, regardless of the qualifications or bipartisan support some nominees have. So as a result, President Trump's second-term civilian nominees have been subject to 120 cloture votes. Well, if somebody watching from West Virginia might not know what that means obstruction, time delay, and inability to get nominees through. That's 29% more than the total of all the cloture votes for nominees in the first 200 days of the Obama, Trump, and Biden administration combined. So procedural hurdles have led to these nominees averaging 94 days between nomination and confirmation in the first 200 days of President Trump's second term. That's 24 days longer than President Biden's nominees, 40 days longer than the nominees in President Trump's first term, and 53 days longer than President Obama's first term nominees. Regardless the reason for obstruction, our Democrat colleagues have been refusing to place well-qualified nominees in agencies where they can be responsive to all in Congress. And help administer programs with congressional oversight and accountability is short-sighted and counterproductive. So I would like to take a moment and speak about two well-qualified nominees I mentioned that have passed out of my EPW committee with bipartisan support, but have been waiting for months, literally, for consideration on the Senate floor because of dilatory tactics. First is Jess Kramer. She's the nominee for the Office of Water at the Environmental Protection Agency. Jess has 13 years of experience advocating for clean water at both the state and federal level, as well as in the private sector, and is exceptionally qualified to lead EPA's Office of Water. Jess was voted out of the EPW committee with a bipartisan vote of 15-4 in April. That was 148 days ago. She has built a career crafting practical bipartisan solutions to improve water policy and ensure that communities have access to safe and reliable drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. During Jess's time working for me on my EPW committee staff, she played a role in shaping the water provisions in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, securing historic investments to modernize drinking water and wastewater systems, remove lead service lines, and to address emerging contaminants. Beyond her experience on Capitol Hill, she has served in both state and federal roles, as well as in the private sector, advocating on behalf of water systems to ensure continued infrastructure investments and smart, achievable regulations. She understands that environmental protection and economic growth can go hand in hand, and she knows how to ensure regulations are clear, fair, and based on science. Jess is exactly the serious civil servant all senators and the American people should want in place now. So I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of the following nomination: Executive Calendar Number 89, Jessica Kramer, to be an Assistant Administrator of the EPA, that the Senate vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate, the motion to reconsider be made and laid upon the table, and that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Reserving the right to object. On April 9th, I voted for Ms. Kramer in the Environment and Public Works Committee. Since then, the EPA has devolved into a cesspool of fossil fuel corruption. As ranking member of EPW, in my constitutional oversight capacity, I have sent 12 oversight letters to EPA asking for documents and communications, as is my duty and my right. Also, several QFRs. As of July, when we went through the closing nominations exercise, I'd received substantive responses to precisely 0 of those 12 letters. So, prior to that August recess, we explored a deal to include Ms. Kramer in the noms package for pre-August recess action if we could get the substantive oversight responses we were due on four of the 12 topics. These were EPA's grants freeze, Administrator Zeldin's false statements about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, EPA's plans to rescind the endangerment finding, and EPA undoing the greenhouse gas reporting program at industry request. I actually consider that to be a minor ask, because it is the administrator's constitutional duty to answer honestly to congressional oversight. Plus, he'd made a promise to the chairman and to the committee at his confirmation to be responsive. Nevertheless, EPA was not willing to provide responses to these questions. I will emphasize this was EPA's decision, not Chair Capito's decision. She is blameless in this. It is EPA that is stonewalling congressional oversight. So that is where we are. We actually just received QFR responses from Administrator Zeldin, which persist in unresponsive and unprofessional non-answers and no provision of documents. In fact, prevarication, insult, and invective have characterized the so-called responses. I say to my colleagues and to the distinguished EPW chair, I don't think it's a big ask that executive branch agencies take congressional oversight seriously. I believe that if former EPA Administrator Regan had ever responded to Senator Capito as EPW ranking member in such a manner, or frankly to any other member of the committee, then Chairman Carper would have hit the roof. To me, EPA is augmenting its corrupt favoritism for fossil fuel polluters with an unconstitutional rejection of congressional oversight, perhaps because there is, in fact, much to hide. Again, honest agency answers to a ranking member ought not to be a big ask. It ought to be the ordinary course of business. A reasonable and good faith effort to comply should be expected. We asked for answers to 4 of 12 letters. There's an easy answer here, that EPA follows the law and the Constitution and the administrator's own promises. But failing that, since EPA won't, I regretfully must object.
The objection is heard.
I thank the ranking member. I don't thank him for his objection, but I thank him for weighing in here today and working well on the committee. I do think that somebody as talented as Ms. Kramer would make the EPA run not much more smoothly, but also she is such a professional. but I don't think we're disputing the qualifications of the nominee. So I will next like to turn to Shawn McMaster, the nominee for the administrator of the Federal Highway Administration within the U.S. Department of Transportation. Mr. McMaster was again voted out of the EPW committee in a bipartisan manner. The vote was 12-7 in June. He has more than 10 years of government service working in the United States House of Representatives and at federal agencies, including the U.S. Department of Transportation. For the last 5 years, Mr. McMaster has worked for 2 private sector transportation companies, first serving as a national practice consultant and vice president at HNTB, and most recently as the vice president for commercial aviation and transportation at the Boeing Company. Mr. McMaster's professional background, both in the public and private sectors related to transportation policy and implementation, makes him especially well suited to lead the Federal Highway Administration. The Environmental and Public Works Committee is now hard at work developing the next surface transportation bill. This is a major undertaking. We have received hundreds of requests from senators on both sides of the aisle regarding this legislation. My goal as the chair is to mark up a bipartisan reauthorization bill in the EPW committee later this year as a step towards having the bill signed into law by next September, when the previous bill will lapse at the end of September 26. Our committee works closely with the Federal Highways Administration in the reauthorization process. FHWA provides valuable technical assistance in making sure that the policy provisions that we all come up with achieve the congressional objectives, but also are within the parameters of the department. Having a Senate-confirmed FHWA administrator is important to facilitate that cooperation between the committee and the administration. This will help address implementation issues during the bill development process. And I believe that our bipartisan reauthorization process would benefit greatly from Shawn McMaster's confirmation. So with that, I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed the consideration of the following nomination. Executive Calendar Number 177, Shawn McMaster to be Administrator of the Federal Highways Administration. That the Senate vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate. The motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and that the President be immediately informed of the Senate's action.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
Senator from Rhode Island.
reserving the right to object. I voted for Mr. McMaster in committee. Indeed, I pushed for his inclusion in a nominations package before the August recess, and I succeeded. He was included for confirmation at that time in that package. I had asked DOT to release its new National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program guidance, and to do so timely as consideration for supporting Mr. McMaster's inclusion in that nominations package. But then what happened? President Trump did not agree to the package. Indeed, he rejected it, adding, for good measure, an all-caps blast at the Democratic leader that he should go to hell. And so Mr. McMaster did not get confirmed, even though he was in the package, because of President Trump losing his temper and objecting to the whole package. DOT nonetheless has released the NEVI guidance, and it is very workable for states. For that, I am thankful, and I would like to support Mr. McMaster. Unfortunately, last Friday, DOT announced without warning that it was terminating nearly $700 million in grant funding for 12 port projects, including an $11.25 million grant to the Port of Davisville in my home state of Rhode Island. I got no prior call or explanation from DOT, just boom. Friday. The chairman has been kind enough to raise this matter with Secretary Duffy, and I would like to sort out how this new obstacle thrown up Friday by DOT will be resolved. It's a bit soon, after that unexpected punch in the face, to want to resolve a nomination that's only still pending and not confirmed because of President Trump's objection. I'd like to work with the chairman on a date to come to the floor in support of a unanimous consent for this individual. Indeed, I'd be happy to do the same thing for Ms. Kramer, because I would like to get these issues resolved. But the port hit was an unexpected and, in my view, unjustified blow. So for the moment, while I try to understand that, with the chairman's gracious help, I must object. And if I may, I would add that there was a third candidate involved in these conversations, Mr. Tella, who was also, for an Army Corps position, who was also primed to be on that nominations list with my support. Senator Hagerty, whose chief of staff he had been, made the prudent decision to put him onto the voting list and get his nomination considered on the floor that evening and get him voted through before President Trump exploded the package. So I just want to make a record of the fact that we were ready to support Mr. Tella as well, even before that vote was called to the floor. With that, I yield back and renew my objection.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I just would like to address just briefly something Senator Whitehouse has said by tossing all of the blame to the fact that we have no unanimous consent and no voice vote candidates under President Trump, when the control of that is squarely within the Democrat leader, Senator Schumer of New York. We know, if you look at the chart that's been made, we know the numbers that were done under the Biden administration, under Trump 1, under Obama, under Bush, Clinton, and when you get down to the end of the chart, dip, big zero for President Trump. So with that, I think we're in a place where we need to make adjustments here. I think that's what we're looking at. But I agree with Senator Whitehouse, and these are critical appointments, as many of them are. I'm glad that Mr. Tell was able to make it through at the very end. He's already had a visit to West Virginia, and he's going to do a great job. So with that, I'll yield back my time.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
I would just like to offer one set of figures into the record in the hopes that it helps clarify things. My office tells me that Trump nominations that have been confirmed in the Senate as of September 3rd, number 135. President Biden's nominations confirmed as of that same date in his first months, September 3rd of 2021, was 150. Not counting judicial nominations, Biden has 141 and Trump has 130. So the numbers are actually fairly close in terms of the outcome, although the processes have been different. But again, I want to reemphasize my desire to work with the chairman to get these cleared. I voted for all three, and I'd like to support them as soon as we can get what seem to me to be fairly elementary problems resolved. Thank you very much.